Hindenburg disaster was one of the most debated mysteries of the 20th century. As an act of diplomacy in response to this great unsolved tragedy, Germany dismantled all existing airships. Dr. Hugo Echner, pioneer of passenger airships, called this response the hopeless end of a great dream, a kind of end of the world.
It's burning and bursting into flames and it's falling on the mooring mast, and all the folks agree that this is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh,
it's a look at that Hindenburg train. It is a shame, it is a shame. Hindenburg went up to our brain.
How did this tragedy happen to the Hindenburg? The world wants to know, and the highest United States authorities are driving to learn why 2 died at the very instant of landing the world's greatest airship.
In 1939, Franklin Roosevelt was president, and he was trying very hard to help the British who were being bombed and terrorized by Adolf Hitler. And he was having real trouble with the Congress, who was isolationist and did not want to get involved. Finally, in 1940, after the Hindenburg, he was successful in getting through the Congress a law which allowed the drafting of young men. And believe it or not, I was drafted in 1941. They called it selective service. They didn't call it a draft. It was a draft, but it was called selective service. And the Congress had given Roosevelt the authority to draft young men for 1 year.
Debate began before the Hindenburg even crashed. Some Nazis assumed the Hindenburg would be named the Hitler because it was Hitler's commercial pride and used to drop his political campaign pamphlets. However, in order to create a positive image in both Germany and America, Dr. Echner named the ship after Germany's second president, Paul von Hindenburg. This early debate over a name serves as an example of the tenuous American-German diplomacy following up to the crash and leading up to World War II. Debate surrounding the Hindenburg grew after the crash because of the political implications associated with each explanation for the tragedy. In order to avoid the appearance of a weak Germany, Hitler quickly stated an act of God caused the disaster, and American media reported it as a weather-related accident. However, the FBI, U.S. Bureau of Air Commerce, and eyewitnesses were not immediately convinced. Investigators explored more than 20 possible causes for the disaster, leading up to the question, was the Hindenburg tragedy an accident or was it sabotage? Accident theory explanations included a sudden static electricity buildup called brush discharge, a weather phenomena similar to ball lightning called St. Elmo's fire, or a spark from the engines igniting flammable paint. Sabotage theory explanations included the ship being shot from the ground, bombing by a plane, and a planted time bomb. Proponents of the accident theory in Germany wanted people to believe Germany was too powerful to fall victim of an attack.
This is a black eye for Germany because this was our huge propaganda crown jewel, and suddenly it burns on foreign soil in front of everybody.
Supporters of this theory in America wanted the U.S. to remain isolationist and did not want this debate to pull them into World War II. Proponents of the sabotage theory in both countries did not want the public to think airships themselves were unsafe, while some were just looking for a more sensational story. On his deathbed, only days after the tragedy, Hindenburg Captain Ernst Lehmann claimed the crash was sabotage, in order to cover up his own mistakes in landing the ship. The captains and crew suspected vaudeville acrobat Joseph Spa of sabotage because he continued to go to a crew-only area without permission to check on his dog, and that he seemed overly anxious to land. It was in this area that the fire started. Over 20 years later, the spotlight was placed on Erich Spell, an anti-Nazi who might have wanted to destroy the Hindenburg to show Germany's weakness, but the claims came out of sensationalized books and a Hollywood movie. In the end, investigators found no physical evidence of sabotage. The explosion and fire destroyed most of the Hindenburg, and looters carried off most of the recognizable remains. The Hindenburg was a German airship that had crashed on American ground, leading to an uncomfortable investigation. The result was the first act of diplomacy. America ended their investigation quickly, only 3 weeks after the disaster, and without a convincing answer to avoid becoming entangled with the German government. The second act of diplomacy was to ground the first and second Graf Zeppelin airships that had been scheduled to fly to America.
Public outcry caused this to happen, plus the fact that Hitler invaded Poland and other countries, the winds of war were brewing, and it was time to move on and not do anything with the German government.
Germany did not want to incite America into joining the war by sending them reminders of the Hindenburg tragedy. Moreover, America would not sell safer non-flammable helium to Hitler's regime because they were afraid this would support the German war effort. As a third act of diplomacy, Germany stopped all airship projects by 1940. Airships were melted down for scrap metal to be used in the war. The building of a town for the families of the Zeppelin Corporation was halted, and the hangars were literally blown up. The Hindenburg disaster called attention to the danger of hydrogen-filled airships, and because America would not sell Germany helium, the great dream of the commercial airship died.
Load that ore on the trains and turn that steel into planes. We've got a job to do.
These acts of diplomacy not only led to the end of commercial Zeppelin travel. Airships were used in World War I for bombing, and would have been used in World War II for surveillance and bombing, if not for these acts of diplomacy. The Hindenburg crash changed the way World War II was fought.
It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it. I don't...
My friend Danny and I looked up and saw the Hindenburg, immense shining silver, shaped like a cigar, floating directly above us, so close. Danny threw the Spaulding up as high as he could to try to hit it. But of course he missed, and we both laughed. Later, I heard it crashed in Jersey, and the whole next day everyone listened to the announcer on the radio sobbing. And I remember thinking, radio announcers are always cool, but not this time, so this must be real. And later that week at the movies, they showed it in the newsreel, the Hindenburg collapsing like a huge balloon on fire, and people burning and screaming as they tried to jump, and my mother and the women in the audience crying. Right then I wished that Danny had been able to hit it with the ball and change its course. Maybe that would have saved it.